Well, for you to use the word NASA and innovation in the same question, look at what's happening right now. When I say right now, I'm talking about since a decision was made to have a shuttle replacement. Look at Ares, Orion, and Altair. Look at the systems being planned to go back to the moon. They are very specifically, not necessarily intended, I don't think this is a conscious decision, but they are very specifically being designed to assure that America can go back to the moon and go back to orbit with a new system without learning anything new. The fact that the U.S. taxpayer would fund $150 billion for NASA to go back to the moon and not learn new breakthroughs to help us go to Mars is illogical. Hell, we went to the moon 50 years ago. We don't have to do that again. I prefer that the Russians did it. When they find the Apollo sites and put those pieces in the museum, these people that think we didn't go in the first place, maybe they'll, well, yeah. You know, I don't see anything beneficial about the U.S. spending $100 billion to go back to the moon unless we learn something new that'll help us go to the moons of Saturn. Okay? And so we ought to use that to breed new breakthroughs and to test new breakthroughs and to find it. But look at what's going on with Ares Orion. They're taking a steel case solid motor left over from the shuttle, essentially off-the-shelf technology, well proven, and they're taking a J2 engine, which is a rocket engine developed for Saturn. Hell, I watched it run when I was in college in 1963. And that's the engine we're going to use in the upper stage. This whole thing is put together to assure that we can't learn anything new, to assure there cannot be innovation. And they're saying, well, the reason is it's less risk, so we're doing less risk with the taxpayer dollars. Well, if you're doing research using taxpayer dollars, you better put yourself in a position so that that research can stumble into a breakthrough. And that research has creativity and an environment for innovation. And when you find a breakthrough, if it looks risky as hell, you gotta do it, because if it works, you have a better future. That's what research is all about. NASA is doing nothing but development. They're not doing research in manned spaceflight at all. And I see no reason for them to do that, because we already know that it'll work, and we already know exactly how it will work. Absolutely. Well, I mean, we had made one suborbital space flight with a medium-range Redstone missile. I mean, the thing's only about this big around. Alan Shepard's flight. And John Kennedy got up there and said, well, if he had spoken the truth on that statement to combined Congress, if he had spoken the truth, he would have gotten up there and said, you know, the damn Russians, they're really a third world society, they're communism, they don't have a free enterprise system, but they went out and they beat us. And that's really embarrassing to us, that they had the first, you know, they had Sputnik before we had Explorer, they had Gagarin before we had Alan Shepard, and they beat us. And we're embarrassed by that, and we've got to do something that's impressive so that other folk will look at it and say, well, listen, America is the leader, not Russia. So we can't go out and match what they're doing. The Russians did much bigger space launch vehicles for launching satellites and for getting men in orbit. They did that much sooner than America, because America was very good at something else. America was good enough to make a small, compact, lighter weight nuclear weapon. The Russians still had these big, clunky, heavy ones, so they had to build the big boosters in the arms war. So now, all of a sudden, Russia could take off the shelf and put into orbit much heavier things than we could. So that's why they had the original leadership. I maintain that it's good that we lost that, because we would not have gone to the moon if we weren't coming from behind and had this need to bring back national prestige because we've been clobbered by the damn Russians. But anyway, Kennedy didn't say that. He says, you know, you've heard the speech. He said good things. It fired everybody up, okay? And when he said it, we had no capability of doing that at all in many areas. It wasn't just building bigger boosters. We didn't know how to navigate to go to the moon. We didn't know how to build computers and software and controls to do that. We didn't know how to make rockets that would restart in space. You can list dozens of very important things that had to be breakthrough technologies in order for us to meet that goal of the round trip to the moon in the 1960s. So during that time period, from the time that Kennedy made his talk, 21 days after the Alan Shepard suborbital flight, until we had successful lunar landings, in that enormously short period of time, what was it, eight and a half years? We developed and flew in 7 years, we developed and flew safely with no accidents 5 different launch systems for human spaceflight. The Redstone, the Atlas, the Titan, a Saturn I, and a Saturn V. They were all flown without accidents. Perfect safety record. 5 different ones in 7 years. Now compare that to us trying to do Ares Orion with off-the-shelf parts. What? I mean, NASA should have looked at that and said, well, this is too easy. Give it to, give it to Ford or General Motors or something, because we already know how to do that. And, give us something hard to do. Give us a challenge to go to the moons of Saturn. Then we'll have to invent new stuff in order to believe that we can do it. In Apollo, in the 60s, we had to invent new stuff in order to believe that we could do it. Now, I like to call the difference between research and development. Some people use that interchangeably. They'll say R&D. They're 2 totally different things. I believe that research, that you can claim that you're doing research only if half of the people, and I'm talking about half of the experts, believe that the goal is impossible. Impossible? Yeah, it's hard, but believe the goal is impossible. And you think, well, wait a minute, we wouldn't spend money for something if half the experts think it's impossible. Well, if you don't, you're doing development. Okay, let's look at the aerospace industry as it was just after the Kennedy talk. We were hiring like crazy. We were trying to get people graduated from college. Hey, you got to go in the space program. We need you. They were taking people that were doing these high-performance racing dragsters and getting them to help develop the turbopumps for the rocket engines. They were reaching out for all kinds of capability. Okay, now aerospace folks thought, wow, we've got an enormously difficult goal, and it'll run clear to 1970. You talk about multi-year funding, approved multi-year funding. This is wonderful. Man, I can build half my career on this. This is great, and yeah, we can do it. Okay, that was what everybody's feeling was. That's what everybody's. You look at the interviews during that time period. Yeah, we can do this. We're gonna do it. Okay, take anyone. I don't care whether he was a NASA administrator, an engineer, or a worker in the shop, anybody. Take them in 1961, bring them into a room by themselves, and say, what's your net worth? And they'll tell you. It says, would you bet everything you have that this is actually going to happen, that we'll do a manned flight before 1970 to the moon? A small minority of those people would bet their own money that it would happen, i.e., they don't think it's possible to do that in that short a time period, because to do it, you had to invent things we didn't know. So the 1960s at NASA was an enormous amount of research. The 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and whatever was a lot less. Okay, Alan Shepard was on the first American space flight, suborbital flight, like we did with Spaceship One. 10 years after that, Alan Shepard was golfing on the moon. 1971, he played golf on the moon. In 10 years.